Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Deep Dive podcast with Rhode Island Coalition for Israel, or RICI for short. We are a grassroots nonprofit working to combat Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, and educate about Israel in the state of Rhode Island. In this podcast, we boldly explore issues shaping America, Israel, Rhode Island, and the future of Western civilization. It's hosted by me, Maria Friedman, Executive Director of RICI, and this podcast, we are hoping to bring you clarity to complex topics so that you have the knowledge and confidence to engage in informed discussions. So with that, I am so pleased to invite our special guest today, Tricia Miller, who is the Director of CAMRA's Partnership of Christians and Jews. She monitors Christian organizations and media activities. For those who don't know, CAMRA is a media watchdog organization, which is so important in this day and age where we are honestly swimming and drowning in myths and misinformation about Israel, about the Jewish people, and about the Middle East. So it's a pleasure to have this conversation with you, Tricia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Maria. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. So, first and foremost, you just went on a trip to Israel at such an incredible time in history. So, I would love to hear about what you had planned, what happened, obviously, this war with
Uh-huh.
Iran. Tell us the
Mhm.
story.
Well, thank you. I just got back a week ago, but I got to Israel a week before this current operation started. I went a few days early before a tour group was going to arrive. It was a group of 100 and almost 120 Christian women leaders and pastors, mostly pastors, so mostly women pastors. Anyway, it was the largest group ever of all women Christian leaders to go on a trip. We only got to the second. We had 2 days of the tour, and then this operation started on that Shabbat morning, February 28th. And so for obvious reasons, they needed to get that many people out. They left, all flights were canceled, the airspace was closed. So they left a couple days after. They drove and went out through Egypt. But I had already planned to stay for over a week after the end of the tour, because of my work with camera, because of all the people that I know there and people I was already planning to meet. And so I really felt like I was supposed to stay. I, my whole calling involves standing with the Jewish people and supporting the state of Israel. And I didn't feel right about leaving uh, because this operation broke out. And so I stayed. I was there for a full 3 weeks of missile attacks and alerts and going to bomb shelters and just being fully immersed in what the Israeli people go through on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. I am so glad that I was there to be able to be a testimony. It's not fun. It's not like I had a fun trip. It's um, it's irritating. The sirens are irritating. The attacks are irritating. Nobody likes being wakened up in the middle of the night to run to bomb shelters. Nobody likes their routine interrupted during the day, even. So it's tiring. It's irritating, is the main word that I would use. I never felt fear. The IDF was doing a fantastic job at intercepting missiles. There have been some deaths and there has been some damage, and all of that is very tragic. But considering the length of this has been going on already for a month, and considering the number of missiles, it's minimal. I mean, even one death or one injury is too much. But considering what it could have been, it's better than what was projected. So I'm thankful for the opportunity to have been there and to just see the people, meet people in bomb shelters, see how their attitudes, see them going on with life, see the resilience, just the beauty of the Israeli people.
Wow, that's incredible, Tricia. And for those who have maybe never been to Israel, can you just explain like where the bomb shelters are, where you went, and also did you happen to see or feel any missiles? I know you said most of them are thankfully intercepted by the Iron Dome, but some of them break through. Did you see or feel any in your area?
Yes, I didn't see them firsthand. I saw other people's videos because I was doing what I was supposed to do when I went to the bomb shelter. But many people were videoing the interceptions. We have great videos of missiles coming in and the interceptions. I certainly heard lots of booms when a missile is intercepted overhead. It does make a very loud boom, and the building shakes. You feel the vibration of the interception and you hear it, even if you're, where you're supposed to be in a shelter. Um, you asked about where shelters are. I, of course, was in different hotels all that time, and the hotels all have shelters. Um, some people in their homes have safe rooms. They have shelters if homes are built more recently. Other neighborhoods have shelters that are for, the neighborhood. Um, People have to leave their home in the middle of the night, and if they have small children, and get them out of bed and run to a shelter, that's very stressful for people. So it just depends on where you live, where the shelter is. Ideally, it's in your own home. In a hotel, it's in the basement. You have to go down steps, however many steps, depending on what floor you're on. But then if you're in a neighborhood where the homes don't have them, you have to run to a neighborhood shelter.
Wow, yes. And I know we still have to continue to keep the Israeli people in our prayers because this war is still ongoing. Can you talk a little bit more about just, yeah, how it felt being in this warlike environment? And also, I just want to stress this point that, it's not just a war between Iran and Israel, it's also a war between Iran and the US. And again, that's one of our missions with RICI is to realize that it's not really just Israel as the problem, right? It's a
Right.
larger problem of Islamism, right?
Yeah.
Sharia law, countries that are trying to oppress their people under Sharia law and also basically destroy anyone who doesn't bow down to Sharia law.
Right.
And that includes Americans, right? Because we don't share a border with Iran. So, can you explain for people who might not see these connections or just think, oh, this is a conflict in the Middle East, how is this relevant to Americans?
It's extremely relevant. And it's not a war that started on February 28th. And that's why I was using the word operation, because in the media, it's being called a war, and it's like this is a new thing, that just started. And Israel's being blamed for starting it. And Israel's being blamed for dragging America into it, which is ridiculous accusation because anyone who's listened or watched President Trump for any amount of time understands he's not a person who gets dragged into anything. He makes his own decisions based on what he thinks is best for America. So Israel didn't drag America into this war. America didn't drag Israel into this war either. Israel didn't start this war. This is a war, this is an operation within a larger war that was started by two strong allies, Israel and the United States, because they recognized a common danger from a radical Islamist regime that, like you said, wants to dominate the world. They were a threat to all of us, to anyone who won't bow to their particular version of Sharia law, their Shiite Islam, which is radical. And we were within weeks of being attacked, the United States even. The reason for the timing of this operation is because of the intelligence that is now being revealed. We were within weeks of being attacked, and they were within weeks of having nuclear bombs, and they were even shorter time period, they were going to start attacking Israel again. This is a war that started 47 years ago. This is just a current operation in that war. The war was started by this radical regime. I don't even like to say just Iran without clarifying because it's not the Iranian people. It's this radical regime who took over Iran 47 years ago. And ever since then, they've been yelling every day, death to America, death to Israel. And that includes all of Western civilization. All of us are their enemy. And we are all the objects that they want to subjugate, all of us, either subjugate us or kill us.
Right. Yeah, thank you for explaining that. I know it's obvious to you and I, but I think the average person out there
Mhm.
won't get to hear that information in the mainstream media, right? Which again is why organizations like Camera are so important. But you're so right. It's really an attack on America too, on Western values, and anyone who doesn't bow down to this version of Islam that the
Right.
Iranian regime, IRGC, has been pushing on its people since 79. So I definitely pray and hope that there'll be less casualties, but at the same time, I would like to see the head of the ugly snake, so to speak, cut off, and for us to finish the job so that Iran doesn't have the chance to, rearm or finish its nuclear projects. If we can completely destroy their capabilities and better yet, oust them as a regime itself, I think that would be a whole win for all of society. So in a way, I feel that Israel and now with the support of the US are doing the dirty work for the whole world because this really is a global threat. So before
But
we
it
move
also
on,
includes, well, it also includes the Iranian people. They want freedom. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of them were on the streets in January demonstrating against this regime, and the IRG forces and others mowed them down in the streets. The official figures are 35,000 or maybe 40,000 dead, but it's at least 100,000. We don't even know. Till this regime is gone, we won't know. But
yeah.
the people want to be freed. And when the bombs started falling, they started cheering. And from our sources inside Iran, they say the only time the Iranian people get worried is if the bombs are not falling, because they want this regime taken out. They want this regime defeated. So it's
Yes,
for their sake too. It's for their
you're
freedom.
You're so right, Tricia. We definitely have to keep them in our prayers. I know we're friends with a local Iranian woman who I actually interviewed in our second podcast, who said the same thing, right? What they get nervous when the bombs aren't falling because they think
Right.
that maybe the US is withdrawing support, but really they
Mhm.
do want a chance to get liberated and free as they were before 79. And
Mhm.
I really hope that that can happen. I think this is a, once in a lifetime opportunity. And I know myself personally, I don't want to kick this can down the road. I don't want my kids or my grandkids to inherit a nuclear Iran. I want this to be taken care of. So we will definitely keep that in mind. And on that note, I just want to plug that, RICI has been the only organization in the state of Rhode Island to host any type of pro-Iranian people rallies. We've done several now throughout the state. We've even done something outside of Senator Jack Reed's office to draw attention to this issue because we do feel it's important to stand up for the Iranian people and for Israel in this war, show our support, show that we're defending democracy, and not let the quote unquote social justice warriors hijack our movement and twist it in their favor, right? Because as we've seen, a lot of the lefties have been holding vigils for the Ayatollah, which is absolutely just mind-boggling to me. It just almost doesn't feel real. So we have our work cut out for us, definitely.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Great. So, with that, I would love to go more into, your role at Camera. If you can tell us a little bit more about Camera, about this partnership between Christians and Jews. What called you to get involved in this kind of work?
Well, my calling goes back to my childhood, really, and the way I was raised. I was raised in a Christian home that was very philo-Semitic and pro-Israel. I was raised in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is a high Jewish population. So I had Jewish friends, my parents had Jewish friends, and I really grew up in this bubble where I didn't know there was any such thing as anti-Semitism. And then when I was 20, I got to hear Corrie Ten Boom speak and meet her in a small church in Northern Virginia. And for listeners who may not know who she was, her family is responsible for rescuing over 800 Jews, getting them out of Nazi Europe during World War II through the underground, like, railroad system they had of rescuing Jews. And so I heard her speak and why they did what they did as Christians, what their biblical beliefs were, why they did what they did. And that was a turning point for me in my life where I realized, oh, Christians may need to do something to help Jewish people, at some point. And it was just that it was, I mean, I was already friends with Jewish people and already loved the state of Israel, but I didn't know that there was any such thing as anti-Semitism. So that started me on studying the Holocaust and learning the history of specifically Christian anti-Semitism and what was behind how did the Nazis do what they did? How were they able to do what they did? They had to have had the cooperation of churches. And so then why did the churches either not do anything to stop them or sometimes help? So that started me on my path of studying theology and church history. And I eventually did a PhD in Hebrew Bible, and I wrote my dissertation on Esther because I could look at the history of Christian anti-Semitism by looking at the history of Christian interpretation of Esther, which unfortunately is not very positive. So that is what led me to the job I have at Camera. But it was a lifelong, you can tell it's been a long progression of understanding the sources of Christian anti-Semitism, which are the same as Christian opposition to Israel. There's no difference in the rationale that's used to oppose Israel, as there has been to be anti-Semitic for thousands of years. And so that led me to the job so that I could constructively counter Christian anti-Semitism specifically, but also build Jews and Christians together. Also help work to overcome the historic divide between our two peoples that was almost 2,000 years old. So that's why what I do at Camera, it's under the title or whatever of the Partnership of Christians and Jews. It's working to build us together. Camera is overall, pretty much overall, a Jewish organization, but there are some Christians who work there, and we're working to counter this horrible history between Jews and Christians, which is due to Christian anti-Semitism, and then counter the errors and help strengthen Christian support for Israel.
That is amazing, Tricia. I can tell that you're very passionate about what you do, and it's been a pleasure to oversect. So, on that note about this partnership between Christians and Jews, that is also what RICI does. Could you share a little bit more about how you first got connected with RICI?
Yeah, so I met Howard Brown very soon after I had moved to Boston to take the job with Camera because Camera's headquartered in Boston. Uh, and I met him very soon afterwards. We were at a meeting at a synagogue in Massachusetts, and he and a friend came up to me and they said they've been, working on trying to build Jews and Christians together, and would I be interested in helping? And so, long story short, what we needed to do was meet separately first with the Jewish community and the Christian community rather than bring them together right away because Christians needed to be educated about the history of Christian anti-Semitism to understand the apprehension, the hesitation, oftentimes in Jewish communities about Christians trying to be friends and why and what their motives are, etc. And so to talk with Christians to help them understand the Jewish sensitivities. And then we talked to Jewish audiences about why genuine Christians actually really do want to support the Jewish people and counter the fears of the ulterior motives. So we countered, things like, oh, the Christians just want to proselytize, or Christians are only interested in Israel because of end time events, things like that. And so doing a lot of teaching on the history of Christian Zionism and why Christians stand with Israel. So it was just through that um, that's how RICI came about, was just building Jews and Christians together. But those were the first steps. We first had to work with the two communities separately, and then they came together. And Howard, Howard's just a brilliant strategist, and he's inspiring, and he's just great.
Yes, thank you so much. And for those who don't know, Howard Brown is the former executive director and founder of RICI. So I'm so glad that you guys crossed paths. And I want to dig a little bit deeper into what we were just talking about, right? Like that weariness that Jewish communities might have in working with Christians. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, of course, I know have been, of course, in history many periods
Yeah.
where Christians did prosecute the Jews, and other groups also prosecuted Jews. But what are some of the main obstacles or reasons that you might hear from the Jewish community for being hesitant to partner with Christian groups?
Well, the first thing that usually comes up is, oh, they just want to proselytize. They just want to convert us. And, I can't deny that Christians like to tell people about their belief in Jesus and their relationship with Jesus. But that is not the reason that Christians who understand what the Bible says about Israel and the Jewish people, that's not why they're standing with the Jewish people. It's very clear from the scriptures. Any Christian who's biblically literate, who's reading the scriptures, it's very clear that from Genesis to Revelation, God has called this particular people who didn't ask to be chosen, but God has chosen this particular people, the descendants of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob. It's very specific. It's through Isaac and Jacob, to be the light to the world and to be the instruments of the whole salvation history that God was bringing about from Genesis onward. And so Christians who understand that, understand how integral the Jewish people are to God's plans and also to us as Christians, because we would have nothing. Christians would have nothing without the Jewish people. Christians need to be reminded that Jesus is Jewish, was Jewish, is Jewish. That relates us to the Jewish people right there, because the Jewish people are Jesus's relatives in the flesh. So, Jesus's mother was Jewish, and she had other children. That means, there's physical relatives there. So we also wouldn't have the scriptures. We wouldn't have anything without the Jewish people having preserved the scriptures. So that's what Christians who understand the Bible understand, and that's why they want to stand with the Jewish people. And then they also understand God's purposes for the state of Israel, for bringing the Jewish people back to the land after the exile.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great answer. And I know personally in my experience working with Ricky, I have never encountered a Christian or a church that we collaborate with that was trying to proselytize me or get me to convert. I'm always upfront and introduce myself as a proud Jew when I go and speak to different Christian groups and churches. And I know that that could happen, but it's definitely not the norm. And I think those that are truly, like you said, altruistically friends of Israel and friends of local Jewish communities would not try to convert those people. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. So with that, I wanted to dig into, myths and misinformation. That's what we're saying. Camera is trying to counter those, right? So what are the main myths and misinformation about Israel and Jewish communities that you think are most prevalent in the Christians that you work with?
You mean misunderstandings that Christians have about the Jewish
Yeah.
community?
Or about Israel in general.
Well, let's do about Israel. Let's start with that first. Again, it goes back to how biblically literate they are or not. If they're biblically literate, they understand that God prophesied through all of the Hebrew prophets except Jonah, but every Hebrew prophet except Jonah talks about how God will bring the Jewish people back to the land after the exile. And so Christians who understand the scriptures understand that this is that we're getting to live in the day where we're seeing this fulfilled scripture, right? Fulfilled prophecy in front of our eyes. Literally, Jews from the four corners of the earth, because they've been dispersed for almost 2,000 years since the second diaspora, since the Romans kicked the Jews out in the first century. Um, Jews have literally gone to the four corners of the earth and they're being brought back. And there's no way that could not happen without, I mean, it's supernatural. It's the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and we're living in that time period where we get to see it. And so the misunderstanding comes in where Christians who don't understand that, and they also don't understand the covenant, the nature of the covenant God made with Abram in beginning in Genesis. It's repeated over and over throughout Scripture that the covenant God made with Abraham that included the promise of descendants and the promise of a particular land, that covenant is eternal. That means it's eternal. I mean, there's no end to it. It's also unconditional. When the covenant was cut in Genesis, when you have the description of the covenant making ceremony and the sacrificial animals are cut up, usually in the ancient Near East, the two parties making the covenant would walk through those animals together. But in the scene in Genesis, it says Abram fell asleep and only the symbols of God walked through. That means this covenant is only dependent on God keeping it. And so a common misunderstanding that has been prevalent in Christianity for almost 2,000 years is that the Jews are cursed. God's, rejected them for whatever reason. They come up with all kinds of reasons, which I don't even like to repeat. But they think, oh, God's forsaken the Jewish people. And then now in this generation, well, God doesn't have any purpose for the return of the Jews to the land. But it's only God is responsible for keeping this covenant. So it doesn't matter what the Jews do or don't do, or Israel does or doesn't do. God's going to keep his covenant.
Yes, I think that's a really, really important point. I've definitely heard, just things floating online from different churches, saying that, like, the Jewish people got so far off from God's love because they maybe have made some mistakes in history. And so, therefore, and then insert whatever
Right.
belief that is not biblically based at that point. And unfortunately, many of the followers or people who hear it on social media might think that that's the truth. And then I also know there's this issue of replacement theology. Can you talk a little about that? And also, do you know statistically, like, is there any way to know how many percent of churches believe that, or if that belief has gotten, I don't know, more popularized since October 7th or less?
Well, let's define it first. It's an erroneous belief. Started with by some of the early church fathers, not all of them, but some of the early church fathers started teaching this, that Christians and the church have replaced the Jews and Israel in the purposes of God. We call it replacement theology now because that's what they were teaching. I don't think they labeled it that way then. But that's so basically it's the belief that God's finished with the Jews and now with that there's no purpose for the state of Israel for this regathered nation of the Jewish people. And so it's the logical result of believing that God's finished with the Jews, which we were already talking about. And so that's what the belief is. It's wrong. Throughout Scripture, it's very clear God still has a purpose for the Jewish people. The Apostle Paul does a lot of important teaching on that and the future of the Jewish people, especially in Romans 9 through 11. But you can see God's working with the Jewish people all the way from Genesis through the end of the Christian Testament, which is the book of Revelation. They're still there. So then you asked about if there's numbers. Um, Unfortunately, this inherent belief that Christianity is superior, or another way of referring to this bad theology is supersessionism, that Christianity has superseded the Jewish faith or the Jewish people. It's basically the same as thinking that they're replaced by the church. unfortunately, I think it's in the Christian genes. It's genetic. It's been part of the teaching for almost 2,000 years. And so Christians need to study the scriptures and see what it clearly says to counter that. So I don't, there's no way to know numbers or percentages. It's just, I know that it's something that has always been in the historic church, and we are still dealing with it today. And since October 7th, you mentioned that. Yes, there's been more expressions of it since October 7th.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of different types of myths and misinformation. I also wanted to point out that you and your team have worked really hard to put together different fact sheets, specifically on your website, cameraspartnership.org, slash fact sheets. Is there any of these that you specifically want to highlight for a moment? I mean, I know I've shared some of these in our RICI newsletters, but these might be other common misinformations, not just that Christians might believe, but anyone might believe this from misinformation that they see in the media.
Well, there are some in there that explain the covenant, and summarize what I just said, basically,
Hmm.
that the covenant God made with the Jewish people, the descendants of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob. That's what's repeated throughout Scripture. There's a couple on that. There is also one on replacement theology, and also the current, the most modern, I guess, form or expression that replacement theology takes is in the Palestinian Christian narrative,
Hmm.
which results in the identification of Jesus as a Palestinian. So they take um, replacement theology. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. They take Palestinian replacement theology to another level because they also rewrite history, and they deny that there were any Jews in the land originally. They claim, the Palestinians claim, they are the indigenous people of the land. There were no Jews there even before the 1800s, they claim. Well, so if there were no Jews there when Jesus was born, Jesus couldn't be Jewish, right?
Exactly.
That's how they get to that.
Yes.
So it's completely unscriptural, and it's completely based on their political agenda to delegitimize the state of Israel, to delegitimize a Jewish state, to delegitimize the right of Jews to live in their ancient homeland.
Right. And it's just so blatantly wrong. I mean, they just are completely deleting, I guess some people call it Jewish erasure, right? This presence
Yeah.
of Jewish people for thousands of years in this area to fit their own narrative. And again, we mentioned these social justice warriors who might scream it from the rooftops at rallies and have followers on social media that could perpetuate these ideas, and young people can unfortunately fall for them. So I encourage you, if you're watching this right now, check out that website and share these fact sheets to young people in your network. You don't have to wait until someone's in college. You should, in my opinion, you should have these conversations, in elementary and middle school, so that it's a less chance that a young person could get radicalized or indoctrinated when they do get to colleges. And unfortunately, I think there will always be anti-Israel protests at colleges,
Well,
just because of, that culture, that echo chamber that these colleges have become at many Western universities. So great job on those fact sheets. They're absolutely brilliant. I also want to ask you, just in general, if you could share like a recent win from your work.
um, just reaching, what's most encouraging to me is when I reach pastors, because a lot of what I do is outreach to meet pastors, um, reach them with, let them know the content that not only the partnership website has that you just showed, that's cameraspartnership.org, but the main camera website also is www.camera.org. And on Camera's main website, you'll just see, if you go to the homepage, you just see all of the most recent articles written on every single aspect of whatever's currently being said in the media that's wrong. to correct the error. And so it's a joy for me to go and be able to meet with pastors and share the content we have. And that it's a win every time. That's my, I think that's my greatest feeling of, success or whatever is when pastors are open to this message and understand that their people need more facts on these subjects. And when I'm able to teach Christian audiences why we as Christians stand with Israel, what does the Bible say on all these topics, covenant, replacement theology, all of that, and to be able to provide the facts for that deal with the current issues. So that's really what I love doing.
That's wonderful. That's incredible work. I would love to know because this is a challenge that I've also personally encountered with Ricky in our outreach to Christian pastors as well, is something that I hear so often is, oh, well, we don't want to get involved or we don't want to work with you because it's political. It's political. I don't want to
But
bring politics into my church. So how do you address that?
for a Christian, it is not political, it's biblical. That's my stock answer. It sounds trite, but then I'll go into more detail depending on how much they want to talk. But the first answer is it's not for a Christian, it's not a political issue. If a Christian claims to base their faith in the Bible, it's a biblical issue.
That's an amazing answer. And to add on to that, I always like to say that it's not political to stand up for Jewish human rights and Jewish lives,
Right.
right? It's not political to share how, the Israeli people were massacred on October 7th. I think it's something that everyone in the world should know about, including Christians, right? Because they could include prayers for Israel and the Jewish people in their prayers. I know we've worked with many churches to organize nights to honor Israel or different events in their church, either remembering October 7th or talking about how to combat
Mhm.
modern day anti-Semitism or Jew hatred, how to support Israel in tangible ways in addition to praying, because I always like to say prayer isn't enough. I think it's important
Right.
to couple prayer with action,
Mhm.
whether that is just reaching out to a Jewish person in your community and asking, like, how can I support you? Getting to know someone, reading about Israel, becoming educated in the topic. I also think that that can be part of action. And so I love that answer because really it is biblical. And as you know, Genesis 12 says, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse it will be cursed. So if you believe that that really is the word of God, I think as a Christian, people should take that seriously. And also, I'm a Jewish person, so I don't get that blessing, but a Christian person gets to be blessed for supporting Israel, which is a pretty magical thing. So I know I just
So
asked you to share. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it goes beyond biblical. If I do get a chance to say more to pastors who respond that way, it's also an issue of justice. And we need to, this is a side note, but we need to take back the language, the terms of social justice. The social justice activists who are out on the streets screaming for all kinds of causes, but they would deny the Jews a right to live in their ancient homeland. This is an issue of real justice. It's based historically, it's ethical, it's historic, it's moral, it's justice. Why should the Jewish people not be allowed the right to self-determination in their ancient homeland when there's how many nations that identify as Christian, whether, I mean, we could argue whether they actually act like that now or not, but how many nations identify as Christian? How many nations identify as Muslim? But for some reason, it's not okay to have one nation, a little piece of land, even in compared to all the rest of the nations of the world. It's not okay to have one nation that identifies as a Jewish nation. It's not logical, it's not reasonable, it's certainly against what is just and right
Hmm.
and moral and rooted historically. We have ancient historical sources. You don't have to believe in the Bible. We have all kinds of secular historic sources
Hmm.
that that talk about the Jews in the land. The archaeological record, it's
Yes.
all anything that comes up out of the ground, it's all Jewish. There's nothing Palestinian. I'm sorry. It's all Jewish in the archaeological record, the historic record.
Exactly.
You know,
I love the archaeology. I think it's so cool when they get constantly unearthing more scrolls and coins and ancient things, right, with Hebrew letters and things like that. And so, like you said, there's no Palestinian coin or there's no, you can name me a leader of Palestine. I will personally give somebody money if they can come forward with that information. So it's crazy. And like you said, Israel is like the size of New Jersey. It's so small, right? And it's not like they call us colonizers, right? That's one of the main myths and misinformation right now that we're hearing about Israel. And if that was true, how come there's not more countries that speak Hebrew? If we
right.
colonized other places, wouldn't we have forced them to speak our language, right? Like newsflash, Spain was a colonizer. That's why most of South American countries speak Spanish because they were colonized by Spain. So, you could go on and on with these things, but thank you for sharing that and also advocating for these things in your conversations with Christian leaders. So, could you also talk about, obstacles that you're facing in your work? Is there any specific other types of pushback that you're seeing right now, or other obstacles that maybe are new since October 7th or strengthened after October 7th?
Well, the obstacles have always been the lies and the misinformation, um, the rewriting of history, all of that. But yes, it's greatly intensified since October 7th. Already on October 8th, we saw all the demonstrations on the streets of major cities demonstrating in favor of Hamas, this horrible terrorist organization that just created all these atrocities on October 7th. So the amount of anti-Semitism and the level of hatred for Jews has multiplied at an alarming rate. There's no real safety for Jews, even in America, especially on college campuses. The vast majority of Jewish students don't wear anything that identifies them as Jewish. This is happening in America. This is just, it's unbelievable. But it's because of the narrative, because of the lies that are being told about Israel, the lack of understanding of history, the lack of knowledge of anything historic is also a root cause, but it's a spiritual issue. Ultimately, it boils down to being a spiritual issue where Christians in particular are not understanding the our what our relationship to the Jewish people is supposed to be and God's purposes for the Jewish people.
Yes, I definitely think it's a spiritual battle as well. I know on that topic of, campus anti-Semitism, we are actually organizing a speaker, Dr. Andrew Pessin, who's expert on campus anti-Semitism, to speak on this topic at a local synagogue, Temple Sinai, on April 26th. So anyone is welcome to check out that event. You can go to our social media at RI for Israel on all platforms to find out more about that and to register. I think it's really important to address that topic, make people more aware of it. I know also, like right here in Rhode Island, we have a big Ivy League university, Brown University,
Yeah.
and I have personally spoken to Jewish students, like you said, who don't wear their Star of David anymore, for example, because they don't want to be identified as Jewish, or they're constantly in fear of being canceled by their other classmates, so they're not going to raise their hand in class and say something if their professor maybe says something that's anti-Israel or anti-Semitic in nature. So we definitely have a lot of work to do, and we're constantly trying to find ways to combat this in Rhode Island. We're also going to be organizing a peaceful on-the-ground presence during the Brown commencement graduation ceremonies with our Israeli and American flags. And unlike the Hamasniks, as we like to call them, we will not be disturbing the graduation in any way. We will be quiet, peaceful, just showing solidarity through our flags and also through an aerial banner, which will fly overhead now for the third year in a row. So we're really excited to continue making an impact, but it's a broader issue that, you and I unfortunately can't just solve this issue overnight. We have to come together. Um, I do want to know if you have more young people that are involved in your work, and also if you can share in general, how can people stay in touch with what you're doing and follow you?
Well, my email is Tricia@camera.org. It's Tricia. You have to spell it right. So Tricia@camera.org. If you want, I put out a newsletter just once or twice a month. It's not anything that's going to flood your inbox. If you want to subscribe to that, you need to email me and tell me. I can't just add people to my mailing list. So you need to email me and give me your email address if you'd like to be a part of that. Go to both of the websites that we've mentioned, camera.org and cameraspartnership.org, and you'll have a wealth of resources there. As far as young people being involved, Camera has an extensive campus department with fellows on campus, and a very extensive training program for training students on campus how to be advocates for Israel, how to combat the lies and misinformation. So that's, if there are college people interested, they could go to the Camera website and find out about the campus opportunities as well.
That's wonderful. I also would love to ask you if magically you just had an unlimited budget and time, what would be like a dream project or initiative that you wish you could do in your work?
I would love to reach professors on Christian campuses specifically, but seminaries as well. If there could be, I don't know how many people it would take, but to reach uh, professors, specifically seminaries, because that's where all the people who are filling the future pulpits are coming out of seminaries or Christian colleges in general. And I would love to reach as many of those as possible so that they have the information to equip students with the right information about Israel, with the facts, with the theology, with the history, with the facts about what's going on.
Yes, I would love that as well. And I wonder if there, are already initiatives that someone is working on in that regard, but we definitely need to engage, the professors, right? Because they have a lot of power in their classrooms.
Mhm.
Lastly, I just want to end by asking you if there's anything else that you'd like to share about your work or something that you wish, people would know about Israel.
Yeah, what I'd like people to know about Israel is what I just experienced in the people. Even before I went to Israel, the week before I left for Israel, I was in Nashville, Tennessee, for two different conferences. And there was a significant number of Israelis in attendance at those conferences because they had to do with Israel. And what I was hearing from the Israelis even then, because we all knew something was going to happen with Iran. We didn't know the timing then, but we knew it was going to be sooner rather than later. And what I heard from every Israeli in Nashville before I even went, and then what I heard from every Israeli in Israel after I was there, is that they are happy, willing, and happy to go through what they are going through now because they understand that this is an evil, evil regime that needs to be taken out, that needs to have all of their weapons removed and all of their means to make more weapons removed. And that's what's happening in this current operation. But I just want to make that clear. Everything that the US and Israel is bombing are military sites or regime sites. They're not bombing civilian sites, and the civilians know they're safe. That's why they're cheering when the bombs fall and and get nervous when they stop because they want this to be finished. So, but what I heard in the Israeli people is their great heart for others. This is really, they really epitomize loving their neighbor as themselves. They are happy to go through, so what they said is we're happy to go through this for the sake of the Iranian people being able to hopefully gain their freedom if this regime is weakened enough, and also for the sake of Western civilization. Israel is on the front line of this fight against terrorists. But this war is not all about Israel. It hasn't been. It's been about America just as much. America is just as threatened by this evil regime. Israel just happens to be on the front lines, sacrificing their safety, their peace, their security, for the sake of this, taking out this evil.
Great. Yeah, you totally hit the nail on the head with that one. I'm definitely going to be glued, to the TV as long as this war is going on. And again, I pray for peace in Israel. I pray for the least amount of casualties all around, and that we can just finish the job, as you said, and just eliminate this evil IRGC regime. I also want to just thank you again for your work. You're doing amazing things. This work is so important. I know that it's not easy, and you and I are both in the trenches sometimes experiencing some of that pushback and that
Mhm.
skepticism from different people. But really, you are carrying truth everywhere you go. So I appreciate the work that you do. I encourage people to definitely follow Camera on social media. I know I'm following them already. I believe the handle is at Camera for Truth, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, on
Yes.
Facebook, X, and all the platforms. So follow them because every day they're doing new posts. I know you guys are exposing lies, misinformation by different media companies, doing these fact sheets and doing so much to bring people closer to the truth. So, with that, thank you so much, Tricia. It's been a pleasure talking to you today, and I hope you have a beautiful Easter as well.
Thank you. And Hag Pesach Sameach to you. And thank you for
Thank
having me,
you.
Marie.
Thank you so much.